So here is a former Supreme Court judge, one of the country's leading jurists, saying we are in a major crisis. How can we resolve it? That's the question. I want to look for solutions. Let's go back to our stellar panel that we have. Why don't you kick this off, Colin Gonsalves? Because you've been dealing with a number of these cases of under trials for years. You've been fighting for those who've been arrested under UAPA and kept in jail, non-bailable offense for years on end. What is the solution?
Well, I heard you say, Rajdeep, that maybe the problem lies with the lower court judges not having courage to do things. But I would say the problem lies at the very top with the Supreme Court and High Court judges. And unless the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice of India and his puny judges, unless they step in and grant bail in dramatic cases and in all cases, deserving cases, unless they reverse the present trend of refusing bail, I think the country will not follow. The Chief Justice can't call for a physical meeting of all the judges, but he can set an example. And the senior judges can set an example as they did in Najib's case recently.
No, but even in a UAPA case, even in cases that are traditionally seen as non-bailable, or in narcotics case where the Act seems to suggest that jail first, then bail, even in these cases?
Yes, in a UAPA case, in Najib's case recently, a judge who is going to be a Chief Justice of India in some time said, we are not only going to go by the pernicious provisions of UAPA, we will go by Article 21, the right to life as well.
Yes.
And in 4 years, which to me also is pretty long, in 4 years granted bail because of passage of time for 4 years. Today I had a case in the Supreme Court, UAPA, where a person, 73-year-old person, after 9 years, his trial had not begun. And the judges were very surprised by what had happened. So it's up to the Supreme Court, really, because some of the judgments coming from the Supreme Court, particularly, I'll mention one and I'll stop, Watali's case, where the Supreme Court said, while fighting for refusal of bail, the prosecution can rely on evidence that would be inadmissible in the trial. And that's the most shocking statement, and that's the biggest setback to everybody under. It'll be inadmissible in the trial.
Right.
Inadmissible. But in the bail, you can use it to refuse bail. And unless the Supreme Court shows courage to set aside the judgment in Watali's case, I am afraid that people like Sudha Bharadwaj, Aryan Gonsalves, Surendra Gadling, and the whole lot of them are going to languish in jail for years and years and years. The litmus test for the judiciary is the Bhima Koregaon case. The leading human rights activists in jail, do you have the courage, does the Supreme Court have the courage to release them on bail?
So you're saying the problem actually starts at the top. Why don't you take that Neeraj Kishan call? Because you were a judge, then you were ASG also. You've been a leading Supreme Court. Is the problem, Mr. Kaul, at the top, that our Supreme Courts are setting the example for the lower courts in a way to also be very hesitant to actually grant bail?
Rajdeep, I'll just answer that in a minute, but let's keep in mind one very important thing when you discuss a criminal justice system. Of course, judiciary is a very important part of that. But I'm going to first concentrate on what has been the role of our enforcement agencies in this country. I think we take liberty very casually in this country. Enforcement agencies invariably have a tendency to overpitch their cases. We lock up people at the drop of a hat, and then we keep opposing these bail pleas, and with overcrowding of courts, pressure of cases, and for many other reasons, the hearings get adjourned and people keep languishing. Even the recent case of this boy languishing for 25 days. And what emerged in public domain, it was hardly a case to keep someone behind bars for 25 days. So I think when you talk about reforming the criminal justice system, it's not just about the judiciary. Of course, whenever required, the judiciary has to stand up. Judiciary has to come to the rescue of a citizen. But my difficulty, as I see, irrespective of the regime in power, the enforcement agencies in this country have treated the citizens very shabbily, have treated liberty very shabbily, and merely paying lip service to liberty and saying it's a sacrosanct right under the Constitution means nothing if you do nothing about protecting it. And yes, of course, if you see right from the days of the emergency, let's not also forget, there have been enough judges who ultimately stood up and protected and came to the rescue of the citizen when the state had completely turned against them. But having said that, yes, I think we need more and more judges to come forward. And in many cases, the sad bit is, as Justice Lokur said, why should a person come to the High Court and the Supreme Court to get bail? These are matters where bail ought to be granted at the trial court level. The fact that we have to come to the High Court and the Supreme Court and argue for days and hours to get a bail, when Justice Krishna here way back in the 70s said, bail not jail. Now that today, according to me, is just, it's all lip service. Matter after matter, and it's not today. That's why I said, when people start criticizing one regime, don't forget, every regime that I have known as a lawyer has misused enforcement agencies. Regime after regime, I have seen enforcement agencies always acting in an obdurate manner, acting in a manner where they harass citizens. And this whole thing of being a cage parrot, release them is gone. They still act in the most arbitrary manner, lock up people, and take, for instance, cases of drugs. Just a minute, take cases of drugs. Now, every matter and every person arrested is not part of a cartel. Afghanistan, Pakistan, those are arguments for appropriate cases. You don't use these arguments to lock up many, and as you rightly said, this is a boy whose father is a star. What about thousands languishing, whose liberty is never given any importance at all?
Can I just take that for a moment to Miran Borvankar? Because, Neeraj Kishan Kaul says, look at the way enforcement agencies are behaving. Look at the way, in Aryan Khan's case, of course, it's all come out. It's been highlighted. The manner in which the NCB appears to have targeted Aryan Khan. But there are a number of cases where the role of the enforcement agencies, Miran Borvankar, is coming under the scanner. Whether they are operating under the political pressure, irrespective of the regime, they seem to be gung-ho to just get custody at all costs.
So Rajdeep and Kaul sir, our audience must know that as an enforcement agency, I can arrest a person and keep him or her only for 24 hours. We have to produce them before the magistrate, and magistrate is the final authority in all non-bailable cases to decide, like the current case. Why are we only looking and targeting the Narcotics Control Bureau? It presented its case. The defense had full opportunity to present its case, and it's the special court of NDPS Act, it's the special court which refused to grant bail. So while I am ready to accept that some of us may go overboard, I am absolutely not ready to accept that the fault lies only in police. And as an ex-prison officer, I would also like the audience to know that as a prison superintendent, when I want to take an inmate to the court, because of the tremendous lack of police manpower, we do not get escort to take the inmate to the court for hearing. So,
just to supplement your point, just to statistically supplement, India has only 137 police personnel per 100,000 persons. We have only 1350 prisons that are bursting at an occupancy rate of 120%. Go on.
So therefore, at the field level, when we want to take the inmates to the courts, we are not getting escorts. Police is running short of manpower. Judicial vacancies are equally important when it comes to the hearing. And when we are looking for solutions, I would say e-courts. Let us have them in a huge number, all district prisons, small town prisons, central prisons, get them connected to the courts so that we are not dependent on police escort, and we are able to take the inmates before the courts through internet. I think that is one very good solution which has been used during COVID and can be used now.
That can speeden up the cases. However, the problem, Gopal Shankar Narayan, that many believe is the problem that exists between those who are seen as VVIP prisoner, VVIP detainees who will always have the benefit of top lawyers appearing for them, versus the thousands and thousands of people who do not have access to those kind of top lawyers. And therefore, it becomes almost a judicial lottery. Is that true, or am I being excessive?
No, I think that is very fair. I think you're fortunate to have lawyers on this panel who have, in fact, been the ones who have battled constantly for the smaller person. Mr. Call, Mr. Gonzalez have done yeoman service to those who are not the privileged and who are not the rich. But we don't have too many of those, and unfortunately, we do have a visibility quotient issue with the judges in various courts in this country. So you actually need Mr. Rohitgi to fly down from here to be engaged for these cases, which this is a case for which bail should have been granted on day one. It shouldn't have gone beyond that. The fact that it went this long is a tragedy, but as you said, it's something that happens much more often and on a daily basis to thousands of people. I think there's a
So who's to blame? Where are you going to fix the blame, Gopal?
One large part of the blame I apportion on this. The prosecutorial system in India is severely flawed. Severely, not just a little bit. It's absolutely in shambles. And the reason I say this is this. You may remember the In the Name of the Father, that 93 film about the Guildford Four,
yes,
where Emma Thompson's character, who's a lawyer appearing for the wrongfully confined, stands up and points a piece of paper that she found in the prosecutor's papers, which said not to be shown to the defense. You know, the reason why that was a shocking scene is that in most developed countries, the prosecutors have a solemn duty to disclose to the defense any piece of evidence that may come, which would help the defense and would exonerate them. Separately, in our Bar Council rules, the prosecutors in criminal cases have a solemn obligation not to convict, but to see if there is substantial evidence for the purpose of conviction. In India, the problem is, unlike the Director of Public Prosecutions in the UK and the State Attorney's Office across the United States, the prosecutors here are not trained. So they just believe that, acha, bail case aa gaya, oppose kar. They get ideas off the top of their head. International drug smuggling scene, it will be terrorism next.
No,
it
but
will
why?
always have some national security angle, which some prosecutor comes up from.
No, but why doesn't the judge? No, but Gopal, why doesn't the judge, the lower court judge, pull them up? Why doesn't the lower court judge have the courage to tell that prosecutor, sorry, you don't have a case?
Because 70% of your lower court judges were prosecutors themselves without the better training. I've seen Mr. Call as an additional Solicitor General being fair in cases which he thought should not have ever even come here. I can share this in public. I have seen him tell the briefing council, why are we pressing for this? This man has been in jail for 3.5 years. Why are we going ahead with this? But how many people do that?
You know,
that is the human lesson that the prosecutor should be taught from day one. That, look, you have a job which can ensure that this doesn't even go to court, that these people can be granted liberty on day one.
Colin Gonzalez, since you perhaps deal most with these kind of cases, you know, you mentioned that the problem starts at the top, but is there also a tendency among lower court judges in particular now increasingly to say no bail? Instinctive reaction is no bail. And the
yes, because the higher court judges
and the poorer, I'm going to make a controversy, and the poorer you are, less likely you will get bail.
Yes, of course. If Aryan was a tribal in Chhattisgarh, his case would not start for 7 years and he would not be granted bail. He would have been in jail for 7 years without his trial starting.
Is that what you're saying? Are you serious? Are you saying that if Aryan was a tribal in Chhattisgarh, his matter would not come up for 7 years?
Yes. If he was a tribal in Jharkhand, his matter would not come up for 6-7 years. He would not be heard. He would not get legal aid. He would rot in the prison for long periods of time. So Aryan, I heard somebody say this is not an exceptional case. It's definitely an exceptional case because on account of money, on account of political influence, on account of power, not that he shouldn't get bail. I believe he should have got bail. But it's his power and money and position in society that fast-tracked this case in this way.
Interesting the way you're
it's just...
Neeraj Kishan called, since you were an additional Solicitor General, surely the system, you know, I was in Times of India in 1991, we did a series of under trials who were languishing in jail for years. Then the Law Minister of Maharashtra said, we are going to look at this seriously, nothing happened. Is there a will to actually reform the judicial system, the criminal justice system, Mr. Kaul?
Of course, Rajdeep, if there's a will, there's a way. Let's start First, the infrastructure. Honorable the Chief Justice recently raised the issue. Improve infrastructure, improve the ratio of judges to population, legal fund, legal aid for under trials to be defended in court, more money being spent, investigating agencies who perform both roles of law and order investigation, the process of investigation being strengthened, forensic abilities which they are vested with to be improved, streamlined, better coordination, witness protection. I think there have been reports after reports on this, there have been judgments on this, but there has to be political and bureaucratic will for it. Unfortunately, in this country, we have mastered the art of producing reports with reams of paper and pages. But when it comes to actual implementation, you don't see the fruits anywhere. So if you go back, there'll be any number of reports. But where have the enforcement been? And the lady who was talking before, I think, got it all wrong. I didn't say the enforcement agencies are the only ones responsible. I said they form a very important part of the criminal justice system and when they've been failing in their duties. Of course, no one is denying that at the end of the day, a judge must also rise to the occasion and protect the liberty of a citizen. Of course, he has to do that. No one is denying that. So if you want to, there's a lot that can be done. The question is, where is the will to do it?
Can I very quickly ask you this, Biran Borwan? Is police reform linked to judicial reform? The fact that our policemen, many of them are not simply trained or are under pressure, perhaps, to deliver quote-unquote results?
Yeah, sure. I would agree that police reforms are very closely associated with the reforms in the criminal justice system. Two things I want to highlight. There should be combined training of police or law enforcement agencies, judiciary, prosecutors, and forensic science, with prison officials also being part of this combined training. And secondly, free legal aid being freely available in the prisons would also be a very strong step in reducing the number of under trials being about 70% in the prisons. So free legal aid and combined training of all the units of criminal justice system.
Okay, so this is one aspect clearly that has been debated over the years. It needs will. It needs political, bureaucratic will to actually recognize just how serious the problem is. And I just want to give an example as we end, and I want all your reactions to this, because what we've seen in the last 72 hours exemplifies this. Today, UP Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath said that he's going to file sedition cases against cricket fans who celebrated Pakistan's victory. Now, this is sedition. The UP police slapping sedition cases against cricket fans for cheering Pakistan's victory. I want to get you, Gopal Shankar Narayanan, on this because I know you're a cricket fan as well. Does this again fit in within sedition? We've seen sedition becoming one of those laws which seems to have an ever-expanding ambit. In Uttar Pradesh, a journalist who exposed the midday meal scheme was also charged with sedition. Respond to that, Gopal Shankar Narayanan.
Two ways of responding. One, that the last time India played a match anywhere at an international venue, including at Lord's, do you remember the number of British citizens who were cheering India on? Would they all be put in for sedition if Yogi Adityanath's logic has to be followed? Now, the idea of, in some way, linking anything which is criticism, free speech, celebration, to the idea that this is anti-national activity was in fact struck down yet again this morning by the Supreme Court while granting bail to Taba Faisal in the UAPA case. The Supreme Court has come out with fist swinging, saying how could you possibly, just because somebody sits and criticizes as far as asking for Kashmir being a separate state or supporting an organization, how do you bring all these under those sections of the UAPA? The Supreme Court, I think, has been taking a very strong stand on these issues in recent months, and I hope it will continue. And I hope Mr. Adityanath's advisors will tell him that this is completely misconceived.
In a way, therefore, I use this Colin Gonsalves as an example just to show how there is executive overreach and there is judicial timidity. So you've got executive overreach backed by judicial timidity and a system that refuses to reform, and therefore you're going to have more and more prisoners in the years ahead, more jails getting overcrowded. And where is the solution then?
Exactly, Rajdeep. This has nothing to do with police training. This is to do with police civility, where a chief minister of state, in the case of UP, the chief minister will be the principal lawbreaker. And he'll send a message to the whole state: arrest this activist, arrest that activist, arrest this activist. And the Director General of Police will meekly go and arrest the activist, knowing that there's no evidence, knowing that there's no case. But the Chief Minister will say, never mind, arrest him. Oppose his bail, keep him in jail, teach him a lesson, he'll get bail after 3 years. My job's done. I don't even need a proper trial. I don't even need evidence.
Can I ask
politically directed breaking of the law. That is the root of the matter. At the highest level, senior-most people in the administration and government politically directing prosecutions to be done where they know there is no evidence at all.
Neeraj Kishan Kaul, I asked this question today to Justice Lokur, and he said the Chief Justice must call an urgent meeting of all the judges and look at this issue, and this should be only the single point issue that should be discussed. Do you believe that there is a solution that lies there if the Chief Justice was to take the initiative and say enough is enough, there's a serious crisis in our criminal justice system, we need to try and get our act together? Is that possible, or have matters gone out of hand?
Yeah. No, definitely. I think a push at the highest level would go a long way. But I don't see very much coming from either the politician or the bureaucrat. I think the push will have to come from the judiciary, because all these papers and reports over the years have not been translated into action.
But is our judiciary independent? Sorry to interrupt. Is our judiciary independent enough? Is our judiciary independent enough to tell the political class enough of executive overreach? Is it strong enough to tell police reforms must be implemented? Is it possible? Can they do it?
Why not? Oh, absolutely. Why not? You just had an order a day back. What does that reflect? You had an order yesterday in the Pegasus matter. If that order can be passed, why can an order not be passed pushing for reform of the criminal justice system? What's wrong with it? I'm sure it can happen.
Okay. That's a positive note to end a discussion which perhaps I fear as a cynic we may well have to discuss in the years ahead as well. Because I just wonder whether our political system has the will to really reform the judiciary. And without judicial reform, without reforming the criminal justice system, this country cannot move forward. This is a challenge. It doesn't require Aryan Khan's case for us to wake up. It should be, we should have woken up our conscience when, as Colin Gonsalves says, there's a tribal in Chhattisgarh who's lying in jail for years on end without even getting the basic legal support that he or she deserves as an Indian citizen. We need to change this system and change it now. Think about it. Thank you all very much for lending your wisdom and your energy to this discussion tonight.